Hi, I'm Rochelle, and you're listening to Box F1 Pod. Today we're debriefing the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, which had plenty of juicy drama to dissect. I mean, the drama kept going way after everyone left the track, more specifically when someone allegedly flew off with a trophy that was no longer theirs, and we will get to all of it. We'll break down the race in Jeddah and the drama that happened before, during, and after. But first, it's time for the digital warm-up. Do-do-do. Lap 1, Lewis gossip. So there have been a couple of major Lewis stories from the last couple of weeks that I felt deserved their own lap. The first of which is him complaining about the car, which is less of a story and more of an ongoing issue that's just been fueled with some extra saucy quotes lately. The first of which he made after the Bahrain Grand Prix when he said, I've driven so many cars in my life. I know what a car needs. I know what a car doesn't need. I think it's really about accountability. It's about owning up and saying, yeah, you know what? We didn't listen to you. It's not where it needs to be, and we've got to work. Which, first of all, shots fired. We all knew Lewis was unhappy, and rightfully so. But Lewis has always been much more subtle in dropping these digs and blaming the team. It's been sprinkled in here or there, kind of more sold in a more polite packaging, let's say. But here he's flat out saying that they ignored what he said and we're still fucked. And not only is he saying they messed up, he's saying that they ignored him when he told them what was wrong and continued to mess up. That is no longer he's no longer with the team mentality that he's usually preaching. This is very much separating himself from the train wreck that is currently the Mercedes car. Now, Toto Wolff has said that in 6 to 7 races, the Mercedes car will be a completely different car, which could be true, or it could be Toto still on his PR streak, whereas Lewis kind of has one foot off that train a bit. And this new mentality that Lewis seems to be gravitating towards is evident after the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix as well, when he was asked in the media pen how he feels about George's success that day. And Lewis goes, and I kid you not, he says, that has nothing to do with me, but yeah, I guess it's good for the team. To be honest, I kind of love that Lewis is just sort of letting it rip. It kind of feels more genuine. From what I can gather, Lewis of past years was far more sassy and aggressive, and this cleaned up, polite PR image has become the norm in the later years when he was sort of on that winning streak. And while I think that persona is in part to do with maturity, because he is way older than he was back at the time, and I do think he's far more mature now than he was back then. It also has to do with circumstance, right? It's a lot easier to act that way when you're winning, and when you're losing, it's a lot harder to act that way. But I think it's perfectly okay to experience a whole myriad of emotions, and I like seeing that. I live for that, and I'm glad that Lewis is letting his guard down a little and is giving more authentic answers, because you know what? He should let everyone know that he told the team they were wrong and they didn't listen. He totally does have a right not to give a fuck what happens in George's race, because it doesn't really affect him, especially in the second race. So my point being, he feels more human to me now that he's cracking a little. He's showing emotion, and I like that, rather than the done up version where he felt the sort of idol that's sort of on a pedestal that I can't fully reach or understand. I kind of get him now. I get the mood swings. And that, again, is not to say that he doesn't have a right to them, because he has fully deserved and they're fully warranted, all of it. But my point is, I like to see it. The second thing that's actually a major story and life change is Angela Cullen, who was Lewis's physio, I think was her official title. Angela and Lewis have parted ways before the Jeddah Grand Prix. And if you don't know who Angela is, she is his physio. She's this blonde lady who was always seen with Lewis, carrying his bags, his wardrobe changes, his dog. There's that video of Angela descending a spiral staircase, gingerly holding Roscoe because he can't climb downstairs. And I have definitely complained multiple times before that Angela is by speciality and officially a physio. She's a physical therapist, trainer, whatever, but I've never actually seen her do physio, which would be fine if I didn't see her doing all this other stuff. Like, she's always lugging something that's like 4 times her body weight. But anyway, Angela was with Lewis for like 7+ years. They were beyond close. Like, it was beyond just a employee. They were like really, really close friends. And he frequently said that his schedule, his ability to perform, his mental health would be nowhere without Angela. Which, to be honest, like, given how important she was to him, I'm sure she was compensated more than fairly so that like all that lugging would be like worth it. But anyway, the move is definitely a little suspect. At first I didn't suspect anything. I was just really sad and shocked. And then I was like, this is weird. So I'm going to quickly read through both of their announcements. So Lewis posted on Instagram like a slideshow of pictures of them together, and he wrote, "For the last 7 years, Angela has been by my side, pushing me to be the best version of myself. I am a stronger athlete and a better person because of her. So today, I hope you'll join me in wishing her the very best as she takes her next steps to pursue her dreams. Thank you for everything, Ange. I can't wait to see what the future has in store for you. Rocket ship stars." Angela's post was, "Exactly 7 years ago on this day, I was standing in the F1 paddock for the first time at the Australian Grand Prix. Today, I'm excited to share that I'm off on my next adventure. I'm so grateful and blessed to have had this incredible journey in F1, and I know my story will continue. Thanks to the MB team who have been my family for the past 7 years. And Lewis Hamilton, you goat. It has been such an honor and pleasure to stand alongside of you. I'm so proud of you and everything you have achieved. Thank you for supporting me, believing in me, and showing me the limitless potential we all have within us. I am so excited to watch the next chapter for you. There's nothing you can't do. Life's journey is one big wave. Keep riding, dream big. As dreams do come true, forever by your side, still we rise. Peace sign, rocket star, ocean wave." And it's a picture of Lewis climbing over the wall like years ago, and she's again lugging something behind him. She also did a post the day of the race of her cheering him on, like up on the fence. And she's like, "Wishing Team LH and MB all the best today. Prayer emoji. You are unbreakable and unstoppable. This is why you made it this far. I'll be screaming from home. Toto, you may still hear me." Heart emojis. So what I think is interesting is that in that second post, Angela seems to be referencing a quote that Toto gave about the situation, which is the point at which I began to find things a little suspect. Also, thanks to the box that shared this with me, otherwise I would have probably gone on completely unaware. But a reporter named Toby Gruner tweeted a series of quotes from Toto that evidently seemed to confirm that Lewis chose to let Angela go rather than it being like a mutual decision, as their posts seem to have implied. So this is, I'm gonna just read the thread. Toto Wolff confirmed that it was Lewis Hamilton's decision to split from Angela Cullen. Toto, quote, "I think in every team, whether that's his close circle or also in the wider group, it's not a static situation that you can freeze. We all develop as people and as an organization, and if things don't work out anymore, we need to be honest about it and then bring change. Angela will always be a mascot of the team. She's the only one who has a louder voice than a starting car. But you know, if this is what he decides, we will always absolutely support him, whatever direction he wants to take." So unless Toto frequently talks in the media about her having a very loud voice, it seems that Angela is referencing this particular quote, which would imply that it was actually Lewis Hamilton's decision to split from her rather than a mutual decision, and this journey that she's about to go on, the next chapter in her life that she's about to embark on, that they both reference in their posts, is like, we don't know what it is. And like, I feel like if she was leaving for a different opportunity, she would have said what the opportunity was by now, and she hasn't. It's just this vague opportunity. Even if that is just like spending more time with her family, she didn't even say that. So that's a little weird. But the fact that he would leave her, that he would fire her basically, is odd because Lewis has been very vocal about how important Angela is to him and that he truly probably couldn't live without her. It also seemed, but at the same time, it seems highly unlikely that Toto would go rogue and share that this was Lewis's decision without approval, not just because he's so like PR trained, but also just like out of respect for his friendship with Lewis and Angela. It's just very out of character for Toto specifically. And there's a chance he didn't know that Lewis was not going to reveal that he let Angela go, or maybe he thought it was unfair that he let Angela go and was voicing it, or this quote isn't real, or Toto misunderstood. There's like so many ways that this could have gone. Or Lewis was fine with people knowing that he let Angela go, but the way he phrased it made it sound like it was a mutual decision because she had something else coming up. I don't know. Um, and like for a second, like let's just assume that it's true. It's just bizarre that Lewis's first major step in this new era for him is firing Angela. Like maybe he feels like there's a total lack of control for him given the state of the car and how the season or the last couple of years have gone. So for him, it feels like he needs to do like he needs to act. He needs to make a change. And this is the only change he could feel like he could make. But like clearly Angela's not the problem. I like loved Angela. I loved seeing her around. It's just bizarre. He did comment on the situation on Saturday and said that they're all good and there are no hard feelings and they're still great friends and talk every day and that he wishes nothing but the best for her next phase in life. But also, like, again, what is this next phase of life? Why aren't they mentioning it? And like also if he says there are no hard feelings, that again seems to imply that there was something to have hard feelings over and it actually wasn't that mutual. But regardless, if Angela is a bit butthurt about being let go, which to be fair, she should be, I probably would cry for like 4 days. But like, she still seems to be like his number one supporter. So at the very least, their friendship has remained intact. So I'm glad that at least they have no bad blood. And I really do hope this gives Lewis the change he needs, but honestly, losing a friend that's been so constant for the last 7 years, his physio, his PA, all in one go, seems like a really drastic change that I'm not exactly sure was the right move at a time when his life is so tumultuous in his career. Anyway, moving on, lap two. This is just going to be like a quick rundown of some of my favorite interview moments from this weekend. There were quite a few. Okay, gotta start with the great moment during press conferences, which I first saw on Alex's Instagram story, where Carlos, Lando, Alex, and Yuki all have their hats on backwards and they're all like grinning at the camera, except Carlos, who actually seems to be like in the process of flipping his cap around to match everyone else. And under that picture is one with the whole group, including Valtteri, who was late to join the press conference, but his cap is like on the right way around. And Alex captioned it, Valtteri didn't get the memo, which only makes it funnier when you watch the actual press conference and the interviewer points it out. And the interviewer goes, I've always considered you an outlier, Valtteri, but you're the only one to have your cap on the right way round. And Valtteri, without even flinching, just like nods and goes, thank you. I thought this was the correct way to wear a cap, as the other drivers literally just like giggle away, which simultaneously makes Valtteri sound very old and also just like very Finnish. Like this was major Kimmy vibes. Maybe like 4 more words than Kimmy would have used, but still very Kimmy. I also need to point out that this has been dubbed the Pierre effect on TikTok, which I did not know was a thing, but now that I do know it's a thing, it's very obviously a thing because if any of the drivers were to have an effect, it'd be Pierre. Like, naturally. Meanwhile, though, Max actually missed the press conferences because he was late arriving to Jeddah due to some stomach bug that somehow did not allow him to travel and arrive in time for press day on Thursday, but it did allow him to travel and arrive on Friday. His Instagram post about it literally started with feeling fine again after having a stomach bug for a few days, but will have to postpone travel by 1 day. Like, was he still nauseous or weak from the stomach bug? Like, would the plane make it worse? I just like don't know. Like, I can't imagine the scenario where that would be the case, especially since he's flying private jet. It's not like he's sitting at the back of a plane next to the toilet, you know? But when he was doing interviews later that weekend, he was asked about it and he joked that he just wanted to skip media day, but like, alas, he has to do it anyway. Here he is, which was literally the theory I was like going to jokingly posit. But now I'm like half serious. I bet it's like a little bit of both. You know, he probably wasn't like fully 100 yet, but he for sure could fly and attend if he wanted to. It's just kind of like an after effect. But he didn't want to because he hates media day. So he just easily used it as an excuse, like, oh, still recovering. Not that I'm in any place to judge when I will use literally any excuse not to leave the house or my bed, let alone jet to the other side of the world. So do what you gotta do, Maxie. If there is ever an excuse to skip media day, you take it. One person, though, who would never let a stomach bug interfere with him being polite is George. He was the only driver to talk to Martin on the grid. Literally every other driver ignored Martin as they ran to their car, but George stopped to chat. Say what you want about George Russell, but he is gentlemanly AF. Truly. Okay, another moment that's not so much an interview as just like a hilarious moment was during a segment that Charles and Carlos filmed with Sky where they had to draw each other. And so to pick who went first, they did rock, paper, scissors, and Carlos won. To which Charles goes, I always lose this game. Which is just the most Charles thing ever. Not just like as a fact, but to say it out loud. Somehow it makes perfect sense that Charles never wins rock, paper, scissors and has noticed. Speaking of Ferrari, Fred Vasseur is slowly growing on me, like as a personality. We found out this weekend that Fred has moved HR next to his office so that he could get to know the team better, which I'm sure will help. He's also apparently taking Italian lessons, and it just blows my mind that he lasted so long at Alfa Romeo without learning Italian. I guess Ferrari's like a different level, but like I don't know how he like his French superiority like helped carry him through an entirely Italian team. Also, let's not forget the casual fun fact that Toto dropped about Fred a couple weeks ago that he ate plastic flowers at Toto's wedding. But he also is growing on me as a personality because he seems to be joking literally all of the time. When he was asked if he liked being Ferrari's team principal, Fred goes, "Oh yeah, this is the life." It was just so heavy with sarcasm, I died. Which also brings me to another great team principal moment. During the press conference, the interviewer asked Christian Horner what Checo needs to change this year, week into week, to challenge Max. And Christian, without missing a beat, just goes, his lap time. And the interviewer goes, yeah, okay, but... and like trails off as next to Christian, Fred is just dying, which also just makes me love Fred more because he clearly appreciates what Christian brings to the table. Not enough people do, but Christian brings something magical to the table, and the fact that Fred is just sitting there lolling makes it better. But that reminds me very quickly of another thing I'm so late on, but I would just be remiss not to discuss it because it's theoretically still relevant, and I somehow just got wind of it, but the moment when Aston Martin was first accused of copying Red Bull and the term green Red Bull started floating around, the entire Red Bull pit wall swapped their regular Red Bull cans for the green Red Bull can, which is just such an incredibly subtle, petty move that you just know came from Christian. No one else can strategize subtle pettiness the way Christian can. It's an art. But this brings me to the last interview moment I want to discuss, which is Fernando post qualifying. And you know, we've got our trio of pettiness, Christian, Fernando, and the other one just keeps rotating. But Christian and Fernando are just like consistently petty. And so he was commenting on everyone claiming that Aston Martin copied them, and he was like, everyone is saying there are 2 Red Bulls on the first row tomorrow, but like Red Bull is saying that we're the same, but we are very different. Then Toto was claiming that Mercedes and Aston Martin are the same, but they are very different. It seems like everyone is an Aston Martin now, which is just such a hilariously Fernando way to twist what everyone is saying. It's like that Mean Girl scene where that girl was like, I saw Katie Heron wearing army pants and flip-flops, so I got army pants and flip-flops. And that's like Red Bull going, Aston Martin saw that we had bulging side pods, so they got a bulging side pod. And Fernando's like, no, Red Bull saw that we had bulging side pods, so they got a bulging side pod. Joking aside, though, it is quite bizarre that Aston Martin is being compared to Red Bull and Mercedes when they are 2 very different cars. So it's unlikely that Aston Martin is both. So I think Fernando probably wins this round. Okay, let's move on to lap 4, which is basically just a very random assortment of things that I learned about the drivers this week. Couldn't come up with a better lap title, sorry. First of all, Lance Stroll speaks Italian. I watched a video of him doing literally an entire interview in Italian, fluently, and I swear Lance was just there for so long and I just didn't think much about him, and now suddenly, turns out he's an onion and we're peeling back all these layers. just like one by one. Like he's Canadian, so naturally he speaks French. And I guess whoever wrote his Wikipedia page only put French and English as his languages because they went through the same thought process I did, which was, oh, he's Canadian, so he must speak French and English. But he also speaks Italian. And like I'm just like marveling at what other facts we don't know about Lance that we are soon to discover. It's fun. It's a new fact every week. Last week it was we'll drive with broken wrists. This week it's I speak Italian. Next fun fact, Lando did a live stream where he ordered 17 spring rolls and nothing else and ate them all. Like Lando has come so far and yet we're still only ordering spring rolls and pulling chocolate out of croissants. Like on the live stream, he's like, "This is fine. It has vegetables in it." And like, please, oh please, can Yuki just like queer eye Lando's palate? Can Yuki just teach him food, please? There's more to life than 17 spring rolls and nothing else. In other Lando news, he was on a podcast and confirmed that there is indeed an F1 group chat. First of all, James Hunt is the group photo, and James Hunt is like the hot bad boy of F1, basically. And if you don't know who that is, watch the film Rush. He's played by Chris Hemsworth, which is enjoyable just for everyone. Lando sort of recounted the latest that happened on that chat, and he said there was like a lot of Happy New Year's. No one wished George a happy birthday. But I just need to say that 100% Lewis has muted that chat. Lewis is not participating in that chat. He might check it like every like few months to see if there's something essential he's missing out on, but he is not contributing at all. For sure, Alex is probably contributing occasionally with good memes. I think that probably George is for sure contributing and for sure facilitating. Like he's always trying to organize something. Like he's like, guys, we need to discuss this. Like let's get together. Also, Lewis for sure used that group chat for the first time to organize Seb's good farewell dinner, and I'm pretty sure Seb probably didn't even know the chat existed, even though he's in it. Anyways, that is a great game to just play to just see what vibe everyone would bring to the group chat. Anyway, moving on. This is old news, but to me it's new news, so I'm gonna mention it anyway. But it turns out Max is like one of the best FIFA players in the world. At one point, he was ranked 21st in the world. Like, we knew Max was a gamer, but this is just beyond. Like, Lando built his entire persona kind of around gaming. We always joke about Yuki being like this crazy gamer. And I know during quarantine there was a group of like the younger drivers, I think Charles, Lando, George, and Alex that were dubbed like the Twitch quartet. And Max was definitely mentioned every now and again. Lando occasionally phoned Max while they were gaming. But like, and then there's that clip of Max gaming like on the sim, and you can hear him going, "Penelope, don't touch the cats," at Kelly Piquet's daughter, who I guess was strangling the cats. But like Max is for sure a silent assassin. Like he looks like a gamer more than he looks like a world class athlete, but it's just like such a like a nonchalant part of his personality. He does not advertise it, and I think it's great. Okay, lap 5, paddock fits. Today we've got no one new to throw in the mix, so we're sticking to our usual. And of course, we're going to start with my favorite fashionista, Guan Yu. Guan Yu was wearing like this greenish track pants, like cool sneakers, and like a t-shirt with all of his former helmets on it, a backwards cap, sunnies, and like a Dior backpack. And I don't know if anyone has noticed Guan Yu's subtle shift from his Prada looks in 2022 to Dior in 2023. He's worn Dior consistently at the last 2 races. Anyway, he looks really cool, but like, even I have to admit this outfit is really nothing to write home about, you know, like he just is just like a casual outfit. But the thing about Guan Yu is he doesn't have to be serving a look to be serving, you know? Like he will be a hit in a potato sack. He probably wears the driving uniform better than anyone else. Like he's just cool. Okay, moving on to Lewis. By the way, Lewis loves like going for a runway to track outfit. Like straight from the runway right to track. Every time. It's always like a head to toe situation. And also, if we're going to get into his aesthetic, it's very much like December in the Alps, but really you're on the Arabian Peninsula and it's 85 degrees outside. It always looks hot. Two of his outfits are straight from the Dior runway, including this like sparkly red gray sweater with like wide leg brown pants that have like a single stripe going down them that's from the same material as the sweater. Honestly, he looks like tinsel come to life. Not my fave. The second outfit, though, I actually love, which is like a lavender checkered Patagonia style pullover and lavender sweats that like I think are a bit see-through. This is full like Pacific Northwest but make it fashion. And again, obsessed with this outfit, but I would not wear it if it was like 65 degrees outside, let alone 85. Like I'm schwitzing looking at him. Also, I know I just talked about it, but like anyone else notice that Guan Yu started Dioring like last week and then Lewis pops up in two Dior outfits? Lewis is really like, anything you can Dior, I can Dior better. I can Dior anything better than you. No, you can't. Yes, I can. JK, I'm sure it's total coincidence. But Lewis not only gave us head to toe Dior, though, he also served a head to toe Rick Owens look. And honestly, Lewis looks like he's going to star in Taylor Swift's Bad Blood music video. No shade to him. The Rick Owens model is wearing the exact same outfit and also looks like he's about to take Katy Perry out. So, my least favorite look is this black pants, white t-shirt with like this really long gingham shirt. It looks like a tablecloth from an Italian American restaurant. No offense to Prada, who I'm sure wanted it to look like a tablecloth from just a regular Italian restaurant, but either way, not a fan. It's like a whole picnic situation. The only pro I'll give this look is it looks like he's not sweltering in it. I do want to note quickly, in case anyone's keeping up with fashion these days, that Lewis used to work with a stylist named Law Roach, who did his Met Gala look a couple years ago. And Law Roach is obviously most known for working with Zendaya and making her like a fashion star. And I believe that Lewis's last Law Roach look was at the Singapore Grand Prix. But after that, he began working with a completely different stylist. And to be honest, you can see the shift. When all the wonky knits started coming out, you knew we had a change in vibes. But I bring this all up because Law Roach actually retired apparently recently because of all the politics and drama in fashion, which means that these wonky knits are here to stay, I guess. Regardless, Lewis can continue to serve the look, and even if it's with a different stylist, and Angela is no longer around to lug his outfit changes, I have no doubt that Lewis will continue serving looks. And I will always respect the commitment, and I will always be in awe of the statement pieces he brings with him to every single Grand Prix. And not one statement piece, every item is a statement piece, and there's 4 outfits. So that's like a lot of fashion to bring with him. That's like an entire fashion show to a Grand Prix. My only complaint, really truly my biggest and only complaint, is to dress a little more weather appropriate. I do not want to schwitz when I'm looking at you. I just don't. Anyways, on that note, on that very schwitzy note, that's a wrap on the digital warm-up. Do. On to the race rhyme. Arabian nights, like Arabian days, are more often than not hotter than hot, so why is Lewis wearing sweaters for days? Here in Jeddah, most bets are on Red Bull because they've got wings, but don't forget Fernando's step has got a fresh spring. Max will start P15 due to a mechanical failure in quali, and a penalty puts Charles in P12 because Ferrari. That means our top 3 are Checo, Fernando, and Georgie on track. Immediately though, Alonso overtakes Checo, who overtakes him back. And even though Lance had a good start, it just wasn't meant to be. His car dies way on the side of the track where you can barely see. So the stews are like, this seems like a great moment for a safety car. So it's free box time, and cars come rolling in from near and far. Ferrari has been okay so far, but they've always got a backup fuck up to play, and this time Javi gives Charles vital info with a slight delay. Seems like Charles' own team have him under constant duress. You can always count on Ferrari for red stress, red stress. Also, contact with Pierre ruins the race for Oscar and Lando. They're trudging along in P16 and 17 when Lando gets the commando. Let Oscar through, we really need P15 for no one knows why. Now everyone's grumpy. McLaren has got serious bad luck, you cannot deny. See what happens, Zach Brown, when you're cruel all summer? Your 2023 turns out to be a bummer. Before it's over, George gets a message. Nando might get a penalty. Over, so now he has a plan. George puts the pedal to the metal and is like, I'm pushing like a madman. But then the race ends, and we're all like, bring it home, Checo P. Except fastest lap, Avi, that's Max's. So our podium goes to Checo, Max, and Fernando in P3. The FIA is like, it's your 100th podium, so have some champagne on me. But then the FIA is like, 10-second penalty because your jack was too fast, which means the champagne is a problem because your podium is a thing of the past. Say hello to George Russell, who is definitely P3. Seriously, George, take the trophy and fly home. It's a guarantee. Oh, wait, says Stu, that can't be true. After careful review, Fernando's P3 is renewed. What will we do after realizing there's so much confusion? Lol, nothing. Why? Is something wrong? There's no need for a solution. So let's run through everything we know for sure. Checo's paranoid and Max wants to win, so Red Bull drama is ensured. Also, Aston Martin is here to win, and Ferrari, I don't even know where to begin. And we know the FIA is in total disarray, but there is one other main takeaway. Aladdin may be number one street rat, but take a seat. There's no doubt about it. Checo is the king of every street. Up next, Australian nights, like Arabian days, are more often than not also hotter than hot. Let's see if the next GP will give us drama for days. Okay, on to analysis. So for this part, I'm going to do the same thing I did last time, which is to focus on like all the key moments, like whether that's FIA calls, you know what I'm talking about, or team strategies, or like noteworthy battles and performances. I'm going to do it that way because I find going chronologically sort of detracts from the points we all want to discuss unless it's just like a nail biter all the way through. But please let me know if you don't prefer that, and if you'd rather I structure the analysis portion more chronologically, then I'm happy to do whatever is easiest for y'all to digest. So just shoot me a DM or email at boxboxf1pod on any social and let me know your thoughts on the format of it because I'm happy to change it. So before we get into quali, a couple of just like overall notes. At the beginning of the season, the FIA seemed to grant Lewis a medical exemption for jewelry since removing some of his piercings could lead to infections or like disfigurement given the way they're put in some places. He can't like remove them every week. And I think he even had a doctor's note that he brought to them. But for some reason, the FIA still summoned him for breaching the jewelry ban in Jeddah. No action was taken, so I'm not sure if they're just planning to summon him every race weekend, like, just because? Like, can they not just let him live? Like, he's taken off all the jewelry that comes off, but he's not going to take off his piercings. Still, one of my favorite moments of Lewis is when he showed up to that press conference just, like, loaded with watches and earrings and necklaces and just, like, every jewelry item he could find. That was a great... Like, I feel like Christian appreciated it. He would never admit it, but Christian appreciated the pettiness. Another very random moment that I just want to discuss. Will Smith was here as Lewis's guest, and I still get like a jump scare every time I see Will Smith anywhere. And I will note that it is very clear that Will Smith is in his like comeback era. And by the way, Will Smith has always been very nice. This one incident aside, Will Smith has always been very nice. But it probably, the fact that he's like on a comeback, like apology tour type situation, like probably encouraged him to be more patient and talk to Martin Brundle forever. Like all he did was say how great Lewis Hamilton is, but he still like gave Martin Brundle the time of day when no one else in Will Smith's position would even look in his direction. Which is partly because Will Smith, I think, is a very nice guy, but also he's got a reputation to repair. I did enjoy the slap comments that everyone made. Will Smith will never escape the slap jokes. ever, ever. And I hope he embraces them instead of continuing to slap everyone for a joke he doesn't like. Um, the final incredible moment that I want to talk before going into all the race stuff is the Saudi national anthem, which was tragically out of tune. Like, even I could tell, and I usually can't tell. The zoom in into Lance, who looked absolutely alarmed, and then into George, who could literally barely keep it together, was everything. I feel like I really need to dedicate more time to the national anthem every week because they always tend to give like good moments. And like, obviously, we'll never have Daniel Ricciardo jamming out back. Wow, I would really have loved to see him attempt to jam out to this band attempting the Saudi national anthem. It would have been a struggle. All right, with that out of the way, let's quickly recap quali. So, big moment for McLaren in Q1. Lando had contact with the wall, and the damage was too much for the mechanics to repair on the fly and before the end of the session. So, because Lando's times weren't fast enough to push him into Q2, he was forced to start in P19. Max had a mechanical failure in Q2, an issue with his drive shaft, which I think is part of the gearbox and like communicates between the engine and the car moving, something along those lines. But this issue forced him to start P15 in the race, which meant that pole was up for grabs. Checo ends up going fastest, so he is starting on pole in Jeddah yet again. Charles went second fastest, but because he has a 10-place grid penalty for making like the third change to his power unit, second race, third change, I don't get it, but he is starting in P12. Also, exciting to know that Oscar made it to Q3 and therefore is starting in the top 10 for the first time. He's only had 2 chances, so second chance, amazing. And because Charles had moved from P2 to P12, the entire top 10 shifted. So the starting grid is as follows: Checo, Fernando, George, Carlos, Lance, Esteban, Lewis, Oscar, Gasly, Nico, Guan Yu, Charles, Kevin, Valtteri, Max, Yuki, Alex, Nick, Lando, and Logan. Okay, a couple things very quickly before we get into the race. First, like I said, since this moment had so many great moments on track and there's quite a bit of brewing drama and great radio moments, I'm going to talk about things by team rather than in a chronological rundown, but here is a general timeline events that I'll reference to help you gauge where we're at as I discuss specific moments. So there's the start, first half of the race, safety car, restart, second half of the race, and then the end of the race. Everything I'll discuss either happens at the start, during the safety car, at the end of the race, or in between any of those like milestones. Okay, the second thing, there were 2 major predictions that were made that I made note of because I was like, no way. And then it turned out to be way. The first was Fernando insisting that Max will end up in P2 by lap 25, to which Max responded with, lap 25? I mean, I'll try to do better than that. Max was like very realistic with his expectations for this race, but he was amused by Fernando's like very specific P2 lap 25. And the second came from Nico Rosberg right before the start, claiming that Checo is a worse than average starter, so his start will not go well. Which brings me right into the start. And to be honest, I hate when Nico Rosberg is right. I don't know why. I feel like I should like the guy, and yet his whole vibe is very like environmentalist villain, like the James Bond villain that's like fueled by environmentalism. So he's like, I'm good, but really he's evil. And I constantly find myself wanting him to be wrong. I don't know why. I think it's just his face. Sorry, Nico. Anyways, turns out Nico was right, and Checo did have a very tragic start. Fernando literally overtakes Checo into the first turn. It's epic, it's crazy, but it's not like an endgame overtake because Checo is nipping at Fernando's heels for the next like few laps and ends up overtaking him back in lap 4 and then maintains the lead for the remainder of the race. Another major thing that happened at the start is that Oscar and Pierre had contact, which caused enough damage to Oscar's car that he had to pit for a new nose, which is a massive shame because Oscar had such a great qualifying and there were such high hopes for him in this race. But it's also a bummer because debris from their crash somehow found its way to Lando and missed everyone from P9 to P19. Did I miss everyone else getting damage from this debris, or was literally Lando the only one hit? Like 10 spots later. Regardless, Lando had to pit due to damage from that as well, which put both McLarens right into the back, exactly where they wanted to be. Also, within the first 10 laps, Max and Charles had both made up like a gazillion places. So Charles was now in P6 and Max in P8, which is crazy, crazy, like moving up the grid. But we'll get more into that when we chat about them specifically. First, let's check in with Lance, since his race sort of impacted a bulk of this race. So, a quick update on his injuries. It seems that the wrist that got operated on is actually feeling a bit better, whereas the wrist/hand they couldn't operate on is giving him a bit more trouble, and his toe is achy. And he did this pre-recorded interview with Brundle that they played before the race, and Martin straight up asks him if there's any more maintenance he has to do still. Like, Martin, his body is still broken. It's been about a month now, so he's certainly like over the hill, but he's not like healed. And it takes a lot of like quote unquote maintenance to get unhealed body prepped for existing, just like in life, let alone for like racing a car. So yeah, there's still some maintenance. And I did not forget, I asked my physical therapist how probable it was that Lance's like medical like trajectory and his medical plan made any ounce of sense. And she was like, the only way this makes sense is if they told Lance that you are not going to heal properly. Your bones will heal incorrectly. And Lance was like, KK. Because she was like, physically, no amount of medical intervention, no amount of training, no amount of like rehab will make bones heal faster than an average of 6 weeks. And then you start the rehab. There is no way you take the cast off after 4 days and you're like, yep, that's good to go. So she was like, none of that is medically feasible. Like, his bones are broken and he has caused himself long-term damage. Which is what I said. Okay. Back to Lance's race. He was having a pretty good race. He gave us like a very sick move right in lap 1 when he overtook Carlos into P4. A side note, when the commentators were like, stroll down the outside, I thought they were making a joke that like it looked so easy for him that he just strolled past Carlos into 4th. Obviously, they were just saying his name, but that is a good one to keep in your back pocket for the future, as jokes go. But unfortunately for Lance, even after that epic move, around lap 18, he gets a very urgent radio message from his engineer going, stop, Lance, stop on the track right now. And it's hard to tell what's wrong with Lance's car initially, only that he gets out of the car and the fire marshals are going like ham with the fire extinguisher, but no one like actually sees a fire, just maybe some smoke. And then basically that's it for Lance's race. And all I can gather is that Lance's car had been dying for like 7 laps, and then they realized there was nothing they could do, and he was like, you have to get out now. And on one hand, I'm very upset that Lance wasn't able to see this race through, given the trajectory he's been on this season. But on the other hand, I'm very relieved that he can take some time to ice and elevate. Anything to heal those bones. However, Lance's DNF had a rather intense impact on the rest of the race. So when Lance pulled over to an escape road, and on the TV, to me, and I think literally every other human being besides anyone named Stu, it looked like he was like as far off track as a car could possibly be. He wasn't like anywhere near the road, but for some reason the FIA sent out a safety car, and I'm still not completely clear as to why. Lance says that he thinks his car might have been poking out a little. The FIA is claiming that there weren't any clear camera angles, so they couldn't determine whether he was off track enough. Basically, too long, didn't read. It seemed wholly unnecessary, but it did trigger a whole lot of pit stops, and it did sort of set up the trajectory for the rest of the race. For some it was good, for some it was less good. And one team that did lose out on the safety car was Ferrari. Who would have thunk? So actually, Ferrari was looking pretty dang good until this whole like safety car situation. They had sort of tricked Lance into pitting early, which knocked Lance back several places from P4. And by waiting a couple laps before they pitted Carlos and then before they pitted Charles a lap later, they were able to come out ahead of Lance, which is all very well and good. And we were all very excited that Ferrari had somehow managed to get a strategy called right. But we always need to know not to celebrate Ferrari too early because then shit hit the fan. And I think like this one specific radio message is a very great example of how Ferrari operates. Carlos's engineer gets on the radio and tells Carlos, just keep driving. We've got a plan. Like, thanks for sharing. Are you sure you've got a plan? Because I don't think they did. I don't think they ever do. Or whatever plan they seem to have is just bad. But like, even with that, like, completely useless radio message, compared to Charles, Carlos had a great day on the radios. Because really, it was Charles once again that was on the receiving end of Ferrari's like most brutal blunders. So the safety car already was a setback since the person they were aiming to get ahead of DNF'd and they had already pitted, so they couldn't even cash in a couple of free pit stops. But then Ferrari's Achilles heel communication like reared its ugly head, and to be honest, Charles's radio was some of the best of the day, but in terms of actual communication, it was shite. So towards the end of the safety car, we hear this exchange between Charles and his engineer. Try to push from safety car line 1. Hamilton just pitted. Charles responds, but Javi, you need to tell me that before. And Javi goes, copy. And Charles goes, no, but come on. Basically, you know the safety car dance that the drivers are all doing during the safety car because they have to keep their tires warm while they're going at the speed of the safety car, like etc., etc. But there is a small part of the track where you do not have to adhere to that speed limit and you can really push. And that is specifically between the pit lane entrance and the pit lane exit. Charles's engineer was telling him that since Hamilton was pitting, Charles should really push so he could stay ahead of him once Hamilton came out. Which would have been a really great message to receive as Hamilton is going into the pits and not after he's coming out. And so since Javi delivered that message a little too late, Charles wasn't pushing in that time because he had no reason to, which meant that at the restart, Lewis ended up in between Charles and Carlos. So Charles's frustration is incredibly valid. I am annoyed for him. We all are. But that wasn't the only frustrated radio from Charles. When he realized that he was in P7 and he was staying in P7 and had like no chance of a podium, he got on the radio and was like, being behind like this is really shit. I don't know what to do. And the response was really like understanding, you know? Like it's something you really want to hear when you're like frantic and don't know what to do. Javi said, understood. Understanding. So you can see like how incredibly frustrating all of this is from Charles' perspective. His race in Bahrain was fucked because of a reliability issue. He DNF'd. But that also resulted in him getting a 10-place penalty at the start of this race because they needed to change engine parts. He busted his ass off during quali to get to P2, which meant that he could start in P12 rather than further back on the grid. And then during the race, he worked his way up all the way to P6. And then because of piss poor communications and like no support from the team, he got stuck in 7th with no chance of progressing. Like, that's so fucked. The Monaco Witch is working overtime. Speaking of the Monaco Witch, I saw a TikTok where this girl was like, what witches did Daniel Ricciardo hire to fuck with McLaren this badly? And there's obviously only one kind of witch that does this kind of work, and that's the Monaco Witch. The same witch that's been screwing with Charles for years is now expanding her business, taking on new clients and new victims, and today it's the McLaren boys. Because honestly, what did they do to deserve this? I actually know what they did. They have Zach Brown as their owner, but that's by the by. So as I mentioned, when discussing the start, McLaren was sort of doomed from the get-go. Not only is their car just like bad, they also got hit with terrible luck, aka Pierre, who bumped Oscar, whose debris somehow found its way to Lando, 10 spaces back. Anyway, the resulting situation is that Oscar and Lando are both at the back of the pack now. And I still find this super bizarre, but towards the very end of the race, like the very last few laps, Lando is in 16th and Oscar is behind him in 17th. Then Lando gets a radio message to not make things too difficult for Oscar. Like, what the fuck? Lando has to now let Oscar through, who then overtakes Logan into 15th just as the race ends, giving McLaren a spectacular 15th and 17th finish. Worth it. After the race, Lando, looking fucking miserable, by the way, says he probably could have overtaken Logan, which I actually think he could have. But then he says that he let Oscar have a crack at it and he did it, so fair play. And then he was asked how he feels about the result. Like, what a dumb fucking question, by the way. Like, who comes up with these questions? Like, you're asking a guy, finished 17th, had the worst fucking weekend possible, how he feels? Not great. But Lando says, well, I wouldn't say I'm happy. We were just unlucky, and we also weren't quick. That aside, the true insult today was the fact that McLaren had the audacity to give a team order for a whopping 15th place. Like, what was the point? To give Oscar confidence that the team believes in him? I don't think he's going to have much confidence with 15th, regardless of how he got there. And fucking Lando over along the way. Like, he's stuck by you. Like, he's committed to the team. Like, why was 15th place worth it to make Lando feel like shit? You didn't make Oscar feel good enough to make Lando feel like shit. Truly just like absolutely asinine from McLaren. And there's really no other explanation other than the McLaren witch has taken on McLaren as new victims. All right, another team that had, like, let's say, difficulties on the radio was Red Bull. But first, before I get into that, let's talk about the positives that really did dominate Red Bull's weekend. So obviously, insane performances from both Checo and Max. Checo led the entire race, minus the first 4 laps, like, incredibly. And the most notable thing about Max's performance was obviously that he went from 15th to 2nd by lap 25, exactly as Fernando predicted. I literally almost have a feeling that Fernando just let him sail on by just so his prediction could come true. Like, he didn't fight it just so it could be exactly what he said. But the more juicy part of Red Bull's race started to unfold in the second half of the race. So first, Max had reliability issues. Like, he got fucked during qualifying, but things seemed to be going relatively okay for him during the race until around lap 38 when he started feeling something weird and kept asking if it was the drive shaft, which would mean he was experiencing like a high frequency vibration. Honestly, I think Max might have had a bit of PTSD from yesterday, so his radio was coming in very panicky. And at one point, he was like, it makes like a weird noise at high speed, which honestly sounds like me calling my dad on the freeway, being like, the car sounds weird. What does that mean? The engineers just kept telling him that everything was fine and to chill out because they were monitoring it, so there was no issue. And the commentators at one point were saying that they're trying to calm Max down so that he can focus on the driving since they had it under control on their end. But then Max's engineer gets on the radio and, in my opinion, says the least calming thing ever, which is, so, any more feedback on that issue at the moment? And Max was like, yeah, it's still there. And his engineer goes, understood. Max was just killing it on the radio, and that sort of brings me to the next issue. Towards the end, it was clear Max was not going to try and get first, but he was interested in fastest lap. So Max gets on the radio and asks, what's the fastest lap at the moment? And his engineer is like, we're not concerned about that at the moment, Max. To which Max responds, yeah, but I am. Which is just such a Max response. Like, I just can't hate him for it. I laughed. It's just so Max. Like, he just doesn't give a fuck. At the same time, though, Checo was inquiring who had the fastest lap, and he was told that he did, and this was like lap 48. And then, I'm going to be fully honest, I didn't completely follow this conversation, but this was Checo's radio with his engineer. His engineer says, target 32.6 plus 4. Checo says, is Max doing the same? The response is Max's last lap was 32.6. Checo says, so why are you telling me 33.0? And the engineer responds, it's target plus 4. Job's a good one. We're pushing with everything. So basically, Checo is very suspicious, but the truth is he and Max got the exact same information on the radio. Max just chose to push harder to try and get the fastest lap. Checo instead assumed he already had the fastest lap, so he had no reason to push, which I think was a slight misjudgment on Checo's part, because he should know that Max would try to push. Red Bull just decided not to get involved. Like, could they have told Checo he no longer had the fastest lap? Sure. Did they opt out of violence that day, yes. Like, I can't say I blame them for it. They chose a path where both drivers were reasonably happy. Like, at least Max had second and fastest lap, and Checo had the win. Somehow, neither driver was actually happy with that, but whatever. Unrelated to the fastest lap, but Mercedes has been up to their old PR tricks, dropping like backhanded compliments in the media. After the race, Lewis said, "I have definitely never seen a car so fast. When we were fast, we were not that fast. It is the fastest car I have seen, especially compared to the rest." And one of the Sky pundits, I can't remember which, I think it was Brundle, but maybe not, backed up Lewis's quote, saying that he was absolutely right, and that basically it's hard to process how one car can be that much faster than the rest. Um, and yeah, I know the commentators made a note during the race when Max overtook George. I think they were like, it looks like he's overtaking an F2 car. Like, they were like, no shame, no hate to Mercedes. Like, that wasn't an insult to them, but like in comparison, it just looks that much slower. But like these quotes from Lewis and from the Sky pundit guy, like reading between the not so fucking subtle lines, they're obviously implying that Red Bull is cheating, right? Like that there's no way a car can be that fast with the cost cap and their fines from last year. How could they build a car that's that fast? They're also like dropping hints that Aston Martin can't be so fast if they didn't take other people's designs. Like, wasn't that the other thing that Toto's been going around saying? But like, how did Mercedes build a car so fast for 7 years? Just because you're struggling now doesn't mean everyone else is cheating. And for fuck's sake, the answer is very clear. Red Bull gives you wings. Okay, so speaking of Mercedes, we're going to talk about them super quickly. And honestly, I only want to discuss George and his radios because they were great. So, towards the second half of the race, towards the end, basically George was given team orders to let Lewis through since he was on fresher tires, which George conveniently decided to interpret as a suggestion rather than instruction because he responded, "Alonso has a 5-second penalty here, so let's fight later. I want to manage the tires a little bit now." I'm sorry, George, is this Ferrari? Like, did you hear a question at the end of the radio message? Like, it's not a conversation. It's an instruction. But fair play to George. I think take any opportunity you can to not abide by a team order. But I loved when his team was like, Alonso served his penalty at the stop, and George went, "Oh, bleep." It was like bleeped out by the broadcast. And my favorite part is everyone online debating whether George is the type of guy to have said fuck, shit, or bollocks. Luckily, though, also like very confusingly for George and also all of us, his engineer came back on the radio a few laps later and was like, "You have a 4.5 second gap with Fernando, and he might be getting another 5 second penalty, so push." So we all see George push, like try very, very hard to go faster, and then he gets back on the radio and he's like, "I'm pushing like a madman. Is he getting a penalty or not?" And his engineer is like literally holding back a chortle, just going, "Just keep pushing like a madman." For the record, I don't think George had actually pushed hard enough were the penalty 5 seconds, but since it ended up being a 10-second penalty, he needn't have pushed like a madman. He was good to go the entire time. But now we obviously need to talk about the man of the hour, Fernando. Fernando and George had a lot of drama, like together, not with each other, but just like they were involved in the same drama post race, and I'll discuss it after. But for now, I just need to focus on what happened to Fernando on track. So we did discuss Fernando's epic move on Checo in the first turn, which earned him the lead in the race, even if it was just for a few laps. Otherwise, though, once Checo regained leading position, Fernando was just cruising like pretty comfortably in second for the first half of the race. Fernando's first issue came pretty early on when the FIA noted and subsequently penalized him for an incorrect starting location at the start. Now, I'll give it to the Stews. This one was a bit more obvious than Esteban's starting position 2 weeks ago when it was like zoom in times 100 to see anything at all. But yeah, Fernando was clearly shifted a little to the left outside the white line, so that earned him a 5-second penalty. Fernando served this penalty during the safety car where he pitted for new tires. And like, let's all keep in mind that he served the penalty in lap 18. The only time we heard that there might be an issue is literally with like 2 laps to go. George's engineer mentioned that Alonso might get another penalty, and that's like when Fernando was informed as well. It's like times like these that I really miss the radios between teams and race control like more than ever. Like we wouldn't have been caught by surprise if we were in on the conversation. And also, by the way, Fernando's response every time he gets told he has another penalty or like a potential penalty is just like KK. He's got such a great attitude. But I will go into detail about like the whole situation in just a moment once I wrap everything else up that happened during the race. But we'll get back to all of the drama with Fernando. So a few other moments I want to highlight. Alex had a car issue that unfortunately meant he had to retire. He was able to get it into the pit though, and it was low-key sad to see the interviews afterwards. He was like, there's lots of positives from today still. And the interviewer was like, what positives are those? And he was like, I don't know yet. Yuki had a pretty great day. Besides Max and Charles, he also made up the most spots to anyone at one point, making it from P18 to P8. Unfortunately, luck wasn't really on Yuki's side, and he ended up finishing P11, just like barely missing out on a point. His battle with Kevin for it was great, and his little bah on the radio when he wasn't able to complete the overtake was cute, despite the circumstances. All right. Now let's get back to Fernando. Fernando finished the race in third. Fernando did his post-race interview, the very awkward cool-down room, and like the whole champagne and trophy thing. He was celebrated for getting his 100th podium, which is huge. He's like only the 6th driver ever to do so. Bless up Fernando. Everything is looking great, except for like this looming possibility of a second penalty. By the time the supposed penalty was addressed, it was 35 laps and like an entire podium ceremony later. Basically, the penalty was for improperly serving the first penalty. Now, there was some debate as to what the concern actually was. Some people said it was because he served it during a safety car, which is not allowed. Others said it was because the rear jack mechanic started working on the car before the full 5 seconds were up. So he was penalized with a further 10-second penalty, which put him into 4th position and promoted George to 3rd. Honestly, this was all so fucked up. After everyone celebrated Fernando and his 100th podium, like mid-interviews, they're informed that he's now 4th. Like, George is literally giving an interview and someone interrupts and he's like, sorry, but like you're 3rd now. And George is just like bewildered looking around and then like swivels to the direction of the podium and goes, he's on the podium! Get him off the podium! He's joking and he has like 8 mics in his face at this point, and he's like fist pumping and like not understanding what's going on. He says, I mean, I don't know why Fernando got a penalty. At the end of the day, he deserves 3rd place. I mean, I'll take the trophy for sure, but Fernando and Aston deserve the podium. And then fully shook his head in disbelief once he found out why Fernando actually got the penalty. Fernando's response was sort of incredible in that he just still continued to give 0 fucks. He was like all into his feels, like from the adrenaline and the excitement of the race, and like nothing was gonna harsh his vibe. Like he was good vibes only, and nothing was gonna get in his way. But like, you know, Fernando, he can't resist the little sass, so he added on, strange that it took 35 laps and the podium ceremony for them to figure it out. That's not a great look for them. Which is absolutely correct and absolutely fair. But not only did it take them so long to penalize Fernando, they then waited for George to take the trophy, do a press conference, post on social, and then, and this is literally how I think everyone found out, Fernando posted that he was 3rd and that it was his 100th podium, etc., etc. And like, guys, I swear I did not even blink. I thought Fernando was just like continuing to take the piss out of the FIA and be like, whatever, I still think I got a podium. I don't give a fuck. And I was straight up laughing at all the people who were like, does this mean that they're reversing the ruling? And I'm like, guys, it's Fernando. It doesn't mean anything. But then I was wrong. We got official confirmation that Fernando's penalty had been rescinded and he was once again the 3rd place finisher. My number 1 question after all of this is where the trophy is, and my favorite version of events, which I think is just a rumor, and I don't know if it's been confirmed yet, but I would really like it to be true, is that George is already flying home with the trophy, so the trophy was like no longer in Jeddah, which is hilarious to me, and it's hilarious to imagine how like this swap is going to take place. But also, I'd like to say kudos to George for keeping his post-op. It's not his fault the FIA is a joke. I think George and Fernando can both be 3rd. They can share it. But also, this opened up a much larger conversation about the FIA and all these penalties. First of all, the FIA waited way too long from like when this actually happened. They didn't even like note it during the race. And it's not like they were overwhelmed with like all these other issues that they didn't have enough time until later to look at this. Nothing was happening. So there must be like they have to like have some sort of statute of limitations in place on like giving a penalty to someone. And I'm going to go ahead and say that 35 laps, a podium ceremony, and enough time for someone to pack up and fly home is like too fucking long. I think it expires at that point. Second of all, if you remember in Bahrain, Esteban received a penalty for an incorrect starting location, which was followed by a penalty for serving the first penalty incorrectly, which was then followed by another penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Two of these are repeat penalties. The first, the penalty for incorrect starting location, needs to be addressed because if two drivers have accidentally incorrectly lined up, then that is an obvious issue. George pointed out that you can't actually see the lines from the car, so after the formation lap, it's pretty much anyone's guess if they're lined up correctly, and they just hope that they put their car in the right place. Second of all, there was no advantage gain. This is a bit more difficult to manage because that can be up for interpretation as to what constitutes an advantage, but it is true that neither Esteban nor Fernando were positioned in a way that helped them at the start in like any way. The bigger issue, though, is that there is no way for the drivers to know whether they're lined up correctly, and there's like no process in place to ensure that they are. So either they need to draw the grid in a way that the drivers can see the lines from their car, have their teams on site to double check, or something to help facilitate that the rule is followed. Like, again, the rule is good. We don't want any advantages gained, but there also needs to be a way for the drivers to adhere to it that makes sense. The second repeat penalty is that of serving a penalty incorrectly. In both cases, a mechanic touched the car before the full 5 seconds were up. Now, I've seen different ideas on how to make this better. One, if the FIA's timer and the team's timers are differing so consistently, then the FIA needs to get their own person down there to time to make sure like the timers are aligned, or they need to issue FIA timers, like whatever is causing this difference, like they need to address it. The other issue I think might be the wording of the rule. Does touching the car constitute working on the car? If multiple teams are misreading the rules, and the FIA needs to clarify what they mean or rewrite the rule or something to make sure everyone is on the same page and everyone has the tools in place to adhere to whatever the clarified rule is. But like the FIA are not only getting a pattern of events, they're also getting very vocal complaints from the drivers, teams, and from you and from viewers. So like seriously, get your shit together. We can't like play by the rules if no one knows what the rules are. Okay, there are a few things to note in the cool down room and like in the post race press conferences besides all the Fernando stuff, and that's just like a few observations about Red Bull and the dynamic between Max and Checo. First of all, Checo is paranoid AF. He has been keeping a relatively cool front, but some cracks are beginning to show, and we started to see them towards the end of the race and certainly afterwards. He's deeply mistrusting of his team, does not believe they're supporting him, as evidenced by his radios and after the race. Like, he does not trust a word they say. Second of all, his face during the post-race interview when the guy told him Max still had the championship lead and had gotten the fastest lap, Checo was appalled. he made almost the same face he made when he found out that Seb was retiring. Checo immediately brought this up in the cool down room with Max, like asking Max what the team specifically told him about the fastest lap and like mentally comparing what he was told and like deciding whether it was fair. I also think that Checo is partly like his own worst enemy here, and it's not necessarily his fault, but I mean, the trust has been severed at Red Bull, and they may have like put a band-aid over it and like painted it pretty, but they're only pretending it's okay. Checo is at the point where he's going to see betrayal like anywhere he looks. Because to be honest, him and Max got the exact same radio message. The only difference is that Max checked in again and then pushed, even though the team told him it doesn't matter. Whereas Checo assumed that having the fastest lap in lap 48 meant that he had the fastest lap. But the but 2 laps is plenty of time for Max to go fast, and Checo really should have kept that in mind and taken advantage of the situation. And Checo's team just like didn't bother to let him know that Max had set a new fast lap. And arguably, that is a reason for mistrust for Checo. But actually, I think I am on Red Bull's side here. They have two drivers who want to win. Max was unable to get the win today, and they do want Checo to win, and that was the natural driver they were going to like support in this particular race. But they still want Max to be happy. Not that they got that, they got somewhere close, but he wasn't very happy. Giving Max the fastest lap seems like an easy compensation. And I think it was just sort of like abstaining from the truth rather than like lying, you know? Like, I think if Checo had asked again, they would have told him the truth that he didn't have the fastest lap anymore. But Checo didn't ask. So they kind of went with like a don't ask, don't tell situation. But regardless, cracks are showing, and there's absolutely no way this isn't all going to come to a head at some point this season. And my money is on sooner rather than later. I don't think they're going to be able to keep up the facade for very long. The second thing I want to talk about is Max's attitude, and I think there are a few things we can attribute to Max's mood. I think the reason for his second place today were outside of his control. He started 15th because the car sucked, and he still had car issues. Plus, his teammate was ahead, and his car acting weird wasn't allowing him to go full speed to overtake Checo in the same way he might have risked it if it were someone else. And when things are out of his control, I feel like he loses his cool a bit. If it was his fault, I feel like he would have been much more understanding of the situation. Also, Max is the winner. Max is hard on himself, and I think that a winner's mentality is that I should be first. This is definitely the least strong point considering we've seen him come second to Checo before, and he's always had like more grace about it. But we haven't seen him really maybe come second to Checo since their spat in Brazil. So we don't know where their relationship stands from the end of last year. And while they're pretty great in press and stuff before a race, they were pretty awkward during the post-race press conference today. Checo was annoyed that he and Max were given different information, and Max seemed upset that Checo beat him. And again, I do think it's because Max probably feels that him not winning today wasn't like on him. If it was driver error, if it was for his performance, I think he would be more accepting of the situation. But because it was things out of his control, that was more frustrating for him and harder for him to like deal with. Also, and this is pure speculation, but I think Jos for sure plays a role in Max's mood. Like, did you see the look on Jos's face when Max went up to the podium? It's the exact same look he gave Checo when he was celebrating with his team. Now, giving Checo that look is fine, like you're an asshole, but fine. But giving Max your look, Max, who is like straight up the best motorsport athlete in the world, and in general, like one of the top performing athletes of this generation, he came in second in the second race of the season and is still leading the championship. You can't muster like a well done, a high five, a wave. It's like super frustrating. So basically, I think the Red Bull Dream Team was good while it lasted, but it's over now. They'll keep pretending for a bit, but it won't last for long. All right, on to results. First up, driver of the day and Dick in the box. Driver of the day was officially Max Verstappen, which I think is fully warranted, but I also want to give a shout out to Checo for a hell of a race, and a shout out to Charles, who fought a hard battle despite the odds being against him. Dick in the box has to go to the FIA and the stewards for knowing fuck all. It's moments like these that really reinforce my mental image of the stewards as like a weird anonymous body of a bunch of guys named Stu wearing like hooded robes, and they sit in some dungeon and make these bizarre decisions based on nothing at all. Basically, I just get like really culty vibes from them, and also just like kind of useless vibes. Like, who's the man behind the curtain? It's some idiot named Stewart. Like, if you're gonna dish out penalties, be consistent and be clear. If no one knows why or what is happening, you're not doing your job. The other dick in the box this week, and honestly, this is just a general you're a dick, is Jos Verstappen. We just need to talk about Jos. I think like Jos would be a lot less noticeable if you didn't have like such exemplary examples of fathers next to him. Lewis's dad congratulating both of them on the win in 2021. Despite having no reason to. Checo's father, on literally every fucking occasion that Max wins, he's hugging both of them, like waving the Mexican flag. Like, literally, Max is looking to escape the celebration. That's how hard Checo's dad is trying to celebrate with him. And when Checo came over to jump on the team, Jos like got kind of caught in the kerfuffle, and he just flat out ignored Checo. He wouldn't even look at Checo. He did a little side eye, but his face remained like stony face, like staring straight ahead. And to be honest, like, Checo wasn't exactly looking to leap into his arms. It looked relatively mutual, but the look Jos gave him was just so rude and like so different to any other dad we've seen on track. Even Lawrence is more warm and fuzzy. Like, the worst part, I think, is that the look Yas gave Checo is the exact same look he gave Max when Max walked out onto the podium. Like, it was a look of such pure disappointment and like almost anger. Like, I just could not even. He looked like if he could dump Max on the side of the road in the pouring rain right now, he would. Like, I can just see another trauma dump festering in Max, and it pisses me off. Yas is an asshole. He is the dick in the box every time. All right, so the final results are as follows: Checo, Max, Fernando, pretty sure, then George, Lewis, Carlos, Charles, Esteban, Pierre, Kevin, Yuki, Nico, Guan Yu, Nick, Oscar, Logan, Lando, Valtteri, and then Alex and Lance, who both DNF'd. The standings that like really matter this early on in the season is basically that Max is leading the Drivers' Championship by 1 point, way off fastest lap, and he's followed by Checo and Fernando. And obviously, Red Bull is leading the Constructors' Championship, followed by Aston Martin. It's still so early days that all of this could change like any week, but those are the important ones for now. Okay, so that's it for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Next up is the Australian Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time. As always, make sure you subscribe, share with any potential boxes, and follow at BoxBoxF1 Pod on social to keep up in between races. See you soon. Box.